Hello and welcome to the channel. My name's Hemingway Jones. Today, I'd like to chat about one of my favorite watches, the Omega Seamaster. Let's talk about this watch. This is the Omega Seamaster 300M coaxial chronometer in the 41mm case. It's powered by the Omega 2500 coaxial movement, and I can tell you by use and experience, it is awesome. It has a domed scratch-resistant sapphire crystal with anti-reflective treatment on both sides. And I can say the fact that I haven't scratched this thing in 11 years is just amazing. It also has a unidirectional rotating bezel that no longer rotates very easily, so I'm not going to demonstrate that for you. Power reserve is 48 hours, which is decent, but not the best in comparison to what's available today. It's also resistant to water for up to 30 bars or 300 meters. That's about 1,000 feet of water pressure. So unless you're a serious diver, this thing can certainly handle a swimming pool, an ocean, and your tub, all of which I've subjected mine to. The Omega Seamaster, one of my favorite watches, and I've had it for quite a long time. Now, I talk a lot on this channel about developing a relationship with your watch. And for me, it really goes into a lot of the things that I own, whatever it is. It's not about status. It's not about luxury. It's about how an item works for you and the things that you experience with it. It's the story of a thing. And part of the reason why you spend money on an object is so that it lasts, so that it can occupy part of this journey with you. This watch and I have been through so much. It is so much part of my story. I got it back in 2010. My wife and I were dating at the time. It was before we were married, because you usually date before you get married. Yeah. Bought it, and then immediately started to go on all sorts of adventures with it. I've traveled to Spain, to the Dominican Republic. My wife and I were in Venice together. It was on my wrist when I proposed to her. It was on my wrist when we got married. It was my only watch for a long time until fairly recently when I picked up my Tudor and I got my Rolex and I got a bunch of Seicas. But before that, it was all Seamaster all the time. And to be honest, I probably could have worn only this watch for the rest of my life and been perfectly happy. It is a great watch. Now, one of the things that's interesting when I picked this up, I had a different mindset. I think that YouTube changes the way you think about watches. The YouTube mindset on watches is that they have to be in perfect condition. They have these beautiful macro shots of the watch and the face, and there's not a single mark on it. And that's fine, that's great. I've said it before, I have two grades of watches. The ones in the safe that are my investment grade, and the ones that are totally destroyed that are on my wrist. So when I bought the Seamaster, I was thinking, I'm spending good money for a mechanical watch. I don't have to worry about replacing the battery. It's a tough, strong stainless steel watch by a major brand, and I'm going to be able to put this through anything and it's going to be fine. Now it's 11 years later. I've worn it rock climbing. I've traveled, as I said. I've bumped it against the wall. I've bumped it against a refrigerator. I've scratched it here, there. I've changed tires in my Jeep with it. I've done yard work, everything else. It has scratches. It's part of the story. So this watch and I have been through so much that when I look at it and I see that some of the shiny bits now look like they were intentionally brushed. And it sort of makes me happy because we have been through so much. To talk a little bit about the watch itself and what makes it so great. So if something works, don't mess with it. Don't tweak it too much. Now, companies need to do that. They refine it just to have something to talk about and something to sell each year. But I personally feel that the Seamaster has been tweaked to the point where it's no longer has the same character that it had. The 2010 era black Seamaster like this one is elegant. It's thin. It fits under your cuff perfectly. It looks fantastic on your wrist. It's a really nice proportion. The helium escape valve that looks like some kind of strange metallic appendage. It looks just like another crown on this version. Even the face. I would criticize the face of the modern Seamaster. It looks too perfect, too mechanical, as if it were produced by some heartless, soulless computer that simply etched lines in. And maybe mine was too, but it doesn't feel that way. This has an interesting wave pattern that plays with the light, that holds different lights like a facet, like a diamond. And it just, sometimes it looks completely wavy, other times it looks almost flat black. And it's magical and it's interesting and it has depth. Where the modern one is too large to have that same effect. It almost looks like you're wearing some kind of a device on your arm, as if you just really need to see the time. Modern one has so much negative space on the face that I just feel like the subtleties of the light and the dark and the waves and the way that the hour markers and all come together are lost. So it almost looks like a comic version of this watch. The crown has very elegant crown guards. The crown is a nice size. It's almost a vintage size because at this point, most watches have very large crowns. And it works beautifully. The movement, even after all these years, and I never had it serviced, is butter smooth. It's easy to set the time. It feels perfect. There's no grain to it or resistance. It's easy to change the date. The power reserve could be better. It's one of these watches, if you set it down for a day and a half, it's usually run down. The skeleton hands, I actually like. I don't mind that they're not heavily loomed, and I like the fact that they have an open interior so that you can see more of that face. And it's also different. And it has a certain vintage element to it. I tend to like things that are vintage, that are a bit old-fashioned. Usually there's a list of things that I like in a watch, and when something comes along and contradicts half of them, yet I still like it, it then goes beyond like, and those are the things I'm crazy about. The Seamaster's a bit like that. I like bezels that have a coin edge. The Seamaster has a scallop edge. It's terrible. It was never great, even when I first got it. Never easy to turn. Impossible to turn now with whatever grit is under there. I have my bezel set permanently in the default position. The band is incredibly comfortable and the clasp works very well. Now, the diver extension is kind of rubbish. The band doesn't have micro adjustments either. It has some very small links. I haven't changed it since when I got it. In a perfect world, I wish it had a Pelagos spring-loaded extension. That would be perfect. That should be on every watch. It's so great. So for legibility, it's a very legible watch. I always think about how I feel when I wear an item like this. And my Seamaster is very unassuming. It's classic, it's refined, but it doesn't scream its existence. It's very low key and capable. And that's one of the things that I love about it. It's extremely reliable. It looks fantastic with everything. It's perfect for anyone who's looking for a reliable, sporty timepiece that can go from your work life to your home life seamlessly. Let's speak about the design of this watch. It is truly one of the most beautiful classic designs of any dive watch. Instantly recognizable with that helium escape valve, certainly much better in this version. The scalloped edges on the bezel look fantastic and they catch the light perfectly, even if they don't really aid in the working of the watch, in my opinion. The bezel itself has interesting numerals. They're very plain, easy to read, and very modern, and frankly, nautical, which is what you're looking for in a diving watch. The face of the watch itself is really great. I love the double bars up at 12. Of course, you have them at 6 and 9 with the single bar. And at 3 o'clock, you get a very elegant matching date window. So it has a black background to match the black face, which is very nice and makes it very seamless. The hands get some criticism. People don't like the skeletonized hands. I do. I guess I would appreciate it if there was a way to both be skeletonized and have loom from top to bottom. But the bit of loom at the end of them has been sufficient for me. Frankly, after 11 years, the blue loom is starting to fade, which is sad. I really love that color loom, and I'm pretty sure this is my only watch that has that color. So that's a bit sad, but it's a beautiful, well-proportioned watch. One of my favorite things is the second hand has a bit of red at the end, which is very sporty, and it matches the font beneath the Omega symbol that says Seamaster. It ties it all in together beautifully. The hour indicators are raised and they are shiny and beautifully finished, even under a loop. I'd say another thing about this watch is that it definitely has a certain 90s aesthetic to it. And I don't know if it's the association with Pierce Brosnan being the spokesperson for it and the Bond Association at the time, but it definitely has that vintage via the 1990s aesthetic. Now, I like that personally. Now, those of you that have been following this channel for a while or following me over at TikTok or something know that I'm obsessed with Venice. And this watch has a really interesting Venetian connection, and that's the hippocampus on the back of the watch. So that design is taken almost directly from the ornamentation on a gondola. So there's a lot to be said for this classic designed watch. Here are some pros. You can pick up this watch fairly affordably. I think used out there, it goes for around $2,500. That is such a bargain. I would pay that all day long. The watch is very comfortable and elegant, and it fits in pretty much any situation. It's also very legible and it tells great time. So let's talk a bit about the cons. There are a few. If you look at them as cons, they seem like a lot. But for me, cons are often the charm of it. So let's talk about the charming cons. The bezel is complete rubbish. It was never that great, and now it's worse. The bracelet is very comfortable, which is definitely a strength, but not adjustable hardly at all. And the diver extension is frankly not very practical unless you're putting it over a wetsuit. The helium escape valve, I don't consider it a con because it's just too small in this model to make a difference. But if you don't like that asymmetry, then you may consider that a con. Some people don't like the skeletonized hands, so that can be considered a con. I think it's a vintage charm. I've seen these online for one that's pretty beat up, like mine, probably in the $2,500 to $3,200 range, and then all the way up to about $5,000 for one that hasn't been touched. That's all in US dollars. The specs of a watch are very important. We all know what fits us, what kind of thickness we want in a watch, what kind of performance we want out of a watch, but it's not the most important thing. It's really the kind of experience it gives you, the way it becomes part of your life, part of your adventures. That's the true meaning and importance of a wristwatch. And this watch saw me through everything. It's still running fantastic, and I'm sure I will wear it for years to come. So I hope you enjoyed hearing all about my experience with the Omega Diver 300M Seamaster. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, hit the like button, and leave me a comment. I'd really appreciate it. I'm trying to grow my channel, and it's not easy. YouTube is a very tough market to break into, but I'd really like to reach more people and have some really good conversations about watches and about other things that really make our lives interesting. So do me a favor, subscribe and see me again the next time. Thanks.